I never thought I'd hear my father's name followed by the word defendant. The first time I said it out loud, my mouth went dry. They called me to the stand with a voice that echoed in the courtroom air, Ms. Emily Carter. I stood, 60 years old and shaking, and told a room full of strangers why the man who taught me to ride a bike should never walk the streets again. And halfway through my testimony, when I finally looked at the gallery, I realized I wasn't his only victim. That was the moment my whole life broke and finally began to heal. Welcome to Whispered Truth, where real stories of betrayal, courage, and survival are told exactly as they happened. If you've ever had to choose between your blood and your soul, this is my story. Atlanta in late September smells like rain on warm brick. I live on the east side, where crepe myrtles throw pink confetti across the sidewalks and the MARTA train hums like a steel heartbeat. I'm a librarian, retired now, but I still shelve paperbacks at the church book drive on Saturdays. I bake too many pies. I correct the labels on my spice rack for fun. I am, in every possible way, an ordinary woman. My father, Harold Carter, used to say ordinary is the most dangerous word in the dictionary. You look past ordinary. You forgive ordinary. You never question it until it's too late. He was a respected contractor, the kind who'd fix your porch steps and decline a second slice of pie. Coat and tie on Sundays, calloused hands on Mondays. People loved him. People trusted him. He knew how to build things, porches, reputations, stories. Growing up, I learned our house by sounds. His boots on the linoleum at 6 a.m., the scrape of his belt on the chair, the way the front door sighed when it closed. And there were other sounds I learned to smooth over, the clink of a bottle in the garage, the slam of a cabinet hard enough to rattle the good china, my name in a tone that meant don't be slow. If you were a little girl who wanted to survive, you got good at making excuses for sounds. Mom left when I was 12. Dad said it was nerves. Said she needed time out west. We sent letters to an address in Tucson that always came back returned to sender. When I asked if we could call her, he put his palm on the phone like a lid and say, "Not today." When I asked if we could pray for her, he said, "Waste your prayers on someone who deserves them." So I learned to pray in whispers, under the quilt, to a ceiling I hoped was listening. There are two versions of my father, the one the world shook hands with, and the one who came home. Out there, he was polite and punctual. In our kitchen, he could go still as a pond, no ripple, no wind, then slam his fist into the table so hard the salt jumped. He never hit me. He learned how to bruise without leaving marks. He could turn silence into punishment. He could turn kindness into a loan you never finished paying back. By the time I turned 18, I had a job, an apartment, and a plan, college at Georgia State, a life of my own. He never said congratulations. He just said, "Don't embarrass me." When I was 20, I came home to pick up my birth certificate. Dad was in the driveway with a teenager from the neighborhood, Janelle, sweeping out the back of his truck. She laughed at something he said, then stopped too fast. A flinch you only see when you've worn one yourself. He noticed me noticing. His eyes chilled. "She's helping me with a job," he said, loud enough for anyone to hear. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself my mother leaving had wired my brain for suspicion. The mind is generous when it wants you to keep the peace. 40 years later, I was a widow with a gentle dog and a garden that behaved better than most people. I kept my distance from my father, holiday phone calls, a birthday card with a gift card tacked inside, to Dad, from Emily. We were civil like strangers seated beside each other on a bus. On a Thursday, the mailman tacked a thick envelope between the light bill and a coupon flyer. No return address, just my name in tidy block letters. Inside were three things: a photocopy of a police report dated 1983, a photograph of my father in front of a white pickup, and a sticky note that said, "If he hurt you, you're not alone. Hey." My hands trembled so hard I had to sit on the front steps. The report was about a missing girl, Janelle Emd, last seen leaving a church volunteer event. The officer's notes were thin, no signs of foul play, possibly runaway. I looked at the date. It was the summer I came home for that birth certificate. I called the number at the bottom of the note. A woman answered with a voice that had done a lot of holding itself together. Emily? Yes. This is Angela. I'm Janelle's sister. I've been looking for you for a long time. We met at a diner near Decatur with coffee that tasted like perseverance. Angela brought a box of photocopies and a manila folder with a crease down the middle like a healed wound. My sister disappeared when she was 16, Angela said. Your father was the last adult to see her. He told police he dropped her near the corner store. She never made it home. I felt the old cold bloom in my chest. Why reach out to me? Because I think he did this to other girls, and I don't think anyone wanted to see it. People respected him. They said Janelle was wild. They made it our fault. She slid the photo across the table, my father, smiling, arm resting on the truck door like the world was his friend. I found your name in the notes, she said. You came by that week. The officer wrote you looked wary. I thought you knew something. I remembered Janelle's flinch. I remembered the way Dad's eyes had pinned me to the driveway. I remembered swallowing my questions like hot pennies. I didn't know, I said, and it was the truth. But I had felt something wrong and I let it pass. Feeling it counts, she said. Most people never get that far. She told me she'd refiled a request to unseal the original case notes. A non-profit for cold cases had agreed to help. The detective assigned, Lieutenant Avery Lee, would meet us if we were willing to talk. I said yes. The precinct smelled like old coffee and copy toner. Lieutenant Lee had the tired kindness of someone who listens for a living. She began with things she could verify, places, times, names. She didn't push. She let the silence sit without turning it into a threat. When she asked about my father, I told her the truth I'd built like a fence. He never hit me. Then I paused. He didn't have to. Did he control your mother? She asked. He controlled the oxygen in the room, I said. They had more than I expected, old tips, a description of the white pickup, a note about a second girl who reported being followed near a church camp but never filed a complaint. I recognized the camp. My father had volunteered repairs there for years. Is he still in Atlanta? Lee asked. Yes. Would you be willing to wear a recorder if you visit him? Why me? Because abusers tell the truth when they think they still own the narrative, she said gently. And because you are the one person he might try to impress. I went home and sat on my porch until the sun turned the street gold and then gray. I thought of Janelle, of Angela's neat folders, of my mother's letters that never arrived. I said yes. I baked a pecan pie. It felt like armor. My father's house hadn't changed in 40 years. Same curtain rods. Same ceramic rooster on the counter. Same man, just older, skin like paper folded too many times, eyes that still knew how to size up a room and make it smaller. Pie, I managed. He grunted what passed for welcome. We sat. He ate. You look tired, he said, like it was an accusation. I've been thinking about Janelle, I said, keeping my voice level. His fork paused in the air. From the neighborhood, he said. Shane, what happened? You were the last to see her. Police said run away, he snapped, too quick. I let the silence stretch. He hated silence he didn't control. I heard you were helping at the camp that summer. Somebody had to fix things, he smirked. Boys today don't know how to hammer a nail. When he stood to rinse his plate, he turned his face just enough and I saw it, the flicker. Not guilt. Ownership. As if the memory didn't belong to the girl who vanished but to him, like a tool on his workbench. "Dad," I said, and the word felt like a splinter. "Do you ever think about the girls who trusted you? You're too old to start asking childish questions." I left shaking. I drove straight to the precinct and handed them the recorder. "It's not a confession," Lee said, "but it's a crack. We'll widen it." The nonprofit pulled more threads. A retired counselor from the camp remembered a helpful dad who volunteered unsupervised. A woman in her 50s recognized his photo and said she'd avoided the man with the truck by diving into a group of choir moms. Small things. Quiet things. But patterns are made of quiet things. Then came the twist that knocked the breath out of me. Marisol, a woman from my youth group, walked into the precinct with a tote bag full of journals. She wrote about a man who lingered by the church exit, who offered rides, who knew when girls walked home alone after choir practice. She never wrote his name. She drew a little box instead, the shape of a truck's cabin profile. In one entry, she wrote, "He looked at Emily like a test he'd already passed." I had been a landmark in a map I didn't know existed. Lieutenant Lee took sworn statements. The DA convened a grand jury. One late morning, a warrant bloomed from paper to handcuffs. They arrested my father at his workbench, a neat row of screwdrivers above his head, the ceramic rooster still watching from the kitchen door. People say trials are about truth. They're really about words, who gets to say them and who gets to decide which ones count. When the summons arrived, I ironed the blouse my mother bought me for senior pictures. I wrote my statement by hand, then typed it, then changed nothing. The courtroom smelled like cold air and old carpet. The prosecutor began with the facts, dates, witness statements, the case files, the journals, the recorded visit, a partial DNA match from a piece of evidence no one tested back in 1983. Not definitive on its own, but a chord when played with the other notes. Then they called me. I placed my palm on a Bible that had heard more oaths than I'd said prayers. "State your name." "Emily Carter." "Can you tell the court about your relationship to the defendant?" "He is my father." "How would you describe your childhood home?" "Organized. Predictable. Controlled." "Did you observe any behavior that concerned you regarding young women?" I told them about the camp. The truck. The flinches you only see when you've worn one yourself. I said the sentence I'd never let myself say out loud. I think my father learned how to get what he wanted by choosing girls he thought no one would protect. The defense tried to unmake me. "Are you resentful because your mother left?" "Yes. But resentment doesn't create missing girls." "Did your father ever physically harm you?" "No. He harmed the weather. He taught the air to behave." In the gallery, Angela stood, and two other women rose behind her. The judge asked for order. They sat. But the room had changed shape. I wasn't the only voice anymore. I was one note in a chord. The verdict came like thunder, fast after the flash. Guilty on multiple counts, unlawful restraint, aggravated assault, and, tied to the DNA, felony sexual battery. The prosecutor explained the limits, the time that had passed, the laws that weren't written when the harm was done. Justice arrives through the doors it can find. At sentencing, the judge looked at my father like a blueprint that built a house with bad bones. "You used the trust of a community as cover," she said. "You built a life from other people's silences." She gave him the maximums she could. It didn't balance the ledger, but it moved the weight from her shoulders to his. He turned once to look at me. Not angry. Indignant. Like a craftsman told his work wasn't square. "Emily," he said. I didn't answer. Some names don't belong in your mouth anymore. After the trial, the newspapers called it a decades-old case cracked. It felt like the house I grew up in had finally admitted it was on fire, and we'd stopped pretending the smoke was incense. Angela and I meet on Sundays at a park where the oaks keep a permanent shade. We talk about recipes, back pain, which thrift stores have the best books. Sometimes we sit in silence and watch children race leaves in the fountain. That, too, is healing, to watch a world where nothing bad is happening in front of you. Marisol teaches a workshop at the community center, How to Trust Your First No. We built a small circle, women who bring casseroles and court dates, rides to therapy and spare keys. We are not a club. We are a weather system. We keep each other from drowning. I moved my mother's photograph from the hallway to the living room. I stopped pretending she mailed letters that got lost. One night I said it out loud, "Mom, I know why you left." The room didn't answer. It didn't have to. The air felt lighter than it had in 60 years. People ask if I forgave him. Forgiveness is a key. I haven't found the right door for it yet. What I did find is something sturdier than forgiveness. I found what happens when you speak the truth and the room doesn't break. It bends around you until it makes a path. If you're listening to this in your kitchen or in your car outside a house you're not sure is safe, hear me, the first voice you need to trust is your own. The second is the one that says you don't have to do this alone. I testified at my father's trial and realized I wasn't his only victim. I am also not his only survivor. Did you like my story? What would you have done in my place? Would you have testified? Tell me in the comments which city you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories on Whispered Truth. 2 new life stories are on screen. I'm Emily, and I'm still here.